Hi, and welcome to Literary Music Series. I've known Natalie for about 5 years now, so hi Natalie. I'm really excited to be getting to play on this series, so thank you for tuning in, and it's really a privilege to get to share one of my favorite works of music, piece that I don't really feel qualified to play yet, but I'm very excited to be embarking on my lifelong adventure with. So today we're going to be listening to Beethoven's Piano Sonata Opus 111. It is his 32nd piano sonata out of the 32 piano sonatas, so it's his final piano sonata, and it was composed between the years 1821 and 1822. I think it's relevant to note that Beethoven continued to compose in other forms during the last 5 years of his life until his death in 1827. And this 5-year period would have been longer than the hiatus between any of his other piano sonatas prior to this point. So it's pretty reasonable to assume that Beethoven intended for this to be his final piano sonata and didn't just die before having the chance to compose any more. The work is structured in two movements. We have a real polarity between the two movements. So between the two movements, we have hell ascending into heaven. We have a struggle just resolving into this magical acceptance. The manic, terrifying first movement leaves practically no space for light or air or breath, and it then evaporates with this sort of semi-resolved, soft sort of funeral procession. And when the work returns in the second movement, we're given a theme with such a pure, untinged, pacific nature that it really can no longer be of this earth. It's something else, and Beethoven develops this theme through variations. The variations pretty much increase in energy and intensity until this energy reaches a limit, and it just can't extend anymore. So all that has been growing just deteriorates, it dematerializes. And it dematerializes into something that's really radically new. We're reminded time after time in this dematerialized section, sempre pianissimo, always very soft. And the variation form remains, but everything else has really fallen into particles, and it's just sort of obscured by a sense of awe. And then finally, the variation form breaks, and we're awash in a sort of ocean of C major, and then an ocean of A minor, and then C major against A minor. And I should note this polarity has actually carried us through the second movement to this point. And here it reaches the apotheosis of this juxtaposition. And we finally reach the first trills. Trills usually represent some sort of infinity. And the hands are as far apart on the keyboard as they can be. This then descends and descends, seemingly endlessly, until we get back to the theme, finally accompanied by a rumbling, growing left hand, just of energy, until this as well reaches its climax, breaks into trills, and again dematerializes. But here, we are left with the theme, which just softly sings amidst the trills until finally, with one final reaching gesture, there's an acceptance, and the theme cannot stay anymore, so we say farewell. Today I'm going to be discussing Milan Kundera's book, The Book of Laughter and Forgetting. It's a novel written sort of like the second movement of Opus 111 in variation form. For Kundera, these variations are on the theme of memory. It's the theme of personal memory, cultural memory, what we try to hold on to, and what we're trying to erase. The novel is arranged in sections of miniatures. So we have a man erased by his country and friends for failing to declare his allegiance to the new political regime. And we have the same man trying to erase from his memory the woman he used to love. We have a mother recalling her youth, too proud to admit that her recollection has faded but still able to recite a poem that in her childhood she had failed to perform a verse of in an assembly. And we have a wife whose name is Tamina, who is haunted by this memory of her husband because he's asked her to keep a journal of their time together so she'll never forget it. And when he's gone, she tries to remember everything that was so she can write it down, but she can't anymore. And she feels this immense grief because while he was alive, she thought it was silly to write down these memories because she thought that would diminish their love, the idea that she could ever forget. But now she wants to remember. And this drives her to decisions. She decides she's going to do anything she can to reclaim these memories. And in the process of doing anything she can, she loses the memories forever. So all of these stories are a variation on the story of that particular woman, Tamina. Tamina is the wife, and without her memories of her husband, she can't live. She doesn't know how to. She finds a man, or kind of mysterious figure, named Raphael, who tells her, "Whoever wishes to remember must not stay in the place, waiting for the memories to come of their own accord. Memories are scattered all over the immense world, and it takes voyaging to find them and make them leave their refuge." So this reminder that to hold on to what is dearest to us, we can't live in the past. It unfortunately finds Tamina too late. She's already chosen to return to a time in her life before memories of her husband to escape the pain of his loss. And here, even as hard as she tries, she can't belong because she has had a past. Kundera turns to an anecdote about his father's relationship with Beethoven Opus 111 to clarify this point. And I'm gonna get my laptop so I can read that for you. Through the 10 years of his illness, Father worked steadily on a long study of Beethoven's sonatas. He wrote somewhat better than he spoke, but even while writing, he would suffer more and more memory lapses until finally no one could understand the text. It was made up of words that did not exist. Once he called me into his room. The variations from Opus 111 were open on the piano. "Look," he said, pointing to the music. He had also lost the ability to play the piano. "Look." Then, after a prolonged effort, he managed to add, "Now I know." He kept trying to explain something important to me, but the words he used were completely unintelligible, and seeing that I didn't understand him, he looked at me in amazement and said, "That's strange." I knew what he wanted to talk about, of course. He had been involved with the topic for a long time. Beethoven had felt a sudden attachment to the variation form toward the end of his life. At first glance, it might seem the most superficial of forms, a showcase for technique, the type of work better suited to a lace maker than to Beethoven. But Beethoven made it one of the most distinguished forms, and imbued it with some of his finest meditations. True, all that is well known, but what Father wanted to know was, what are we to make of it? Why did he choose variations? What lay behind his choice? That is why he called me into his room, pointed to the music, and said, "Now I know." And later in the book, I understand the remorse Tamina felt. When my father died, I had a bad case of it too. I couldn't forgive myself for asking him so little, for knowing so little about him, for losing him. In fact, it was that very remorse which suddenly made me see what he must have meant to tell me the day he pointed to the Opus 111 Sonata. Let me try to explain it by means of an analogy. The symphony is a musical epic. We might compare it to a journey leading through the boundless reaches of the external world, on and on, farther and farther. Variations also constitute a journey, but not through the external world. You recall Pascal's pensée about how man lives between the abyss of the infinitely large and the infinitely small. The journey of the variation form leads to that second infinity, the infinity of internal variety concealed in all things. What Beethoven discovered in his variations was another space and another direction. In that sense, they are a challenge to undertake the journey, another invitation au voyage. The variation form is the form of maximum concentration. It enables the composer to limit himself to the matter at hand, to go straight to the heart of it. The subject matter is a theme, which often consists of no more than 16 measures. Beethoven goes as deeply into those 16 measures as if he had gone down a mine to the bowels of the earth. The journey to the second infinity is no less adventurous than the journey of the epic, and closely parallels the physicist's descent into the wondrous innards of the atom. With every variation, Beethoven moves farther and farther from the original theme, which bears no more resemblance to the final variation than a flower to its image under the microscope. Man knows he cannot embrace the universe with all its suns and stars, but he finds it unbearable to be condemned to lose the second infinity as well, the one so close, so nearly within reach. Tamina lost the infinity of her love. I lost my father. We all lose in whatever we do, because if it is perfection we are after, we must go to the heart of the matter, and we can never quite reach it. That the external infinity escapes us, we accept with equanimity. The guilt over letting the second infinity escape follows us to the grave. While pondering the infinity of the stars, we ignore the infinity of our Father. It is no wonder, then, that the variation form became the passion of the mature Beethoven, who, like Tamina and like me, knew all too well that there is nothing more unbearable than losing a person we have loved, those 16 measures and the inner universe of their infinite possibilities. This entire book is a novel in the form of variations. The individual parts follow each other like individual stretches of a journey leading toward a theme, a thought, a single destination, the sense of which fades into the distance. It is a novel about Tamina, and wherever Tamina is absent, it is a novel for Tamina. She is its main character and main audience, and all the other stories are variations on her story and come together in her life as a mirror. It is a novel about laughter and forgetting and Prague, about Prague and the angels. So what Kundera is telling us, and what Beethoven is telling us, is that with the theme of the Arietta, we live with the memories that bring us to peace. And we can go deeper and deeper into this theme. We can explore it further and further, try harder and harder to hold on to them and to this theme, but in the end, we will find that we really have to let go. It is just a pianistic detail, but I think it's a meaningful one. So I would point that the final note of the Arietta is, unlike most final notes in pieces, especially of this magnitude, it's short, it's not held, it's merely an eighth note. It lets go. And this brings us to the most famous literary work in which Beethoven Opus 111 is referenced, which is Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus. Because with this final note, Beethoven is not just letting go of the theme in the Arietta of Opus 111, but also of the piano sonata, his piano sonatas. It's the last note in this entire set. So, Thomas Mann gives us the following. He sat on his revolving stool, and in a few words brought to an end his lecture on why Beethoven had not written a third movement to Opus 111. We had only needed, he said, to hear the piece to answer the question ourselves. A third movement? A new approach? A return after this parting? Impossible! It had happened that the sonata had come in the second enormous movement to an end without any return. And when he said the sonata, he not only meant this one in C minor, but the sonata in general as a species, as a traditional art form. It itself was here at an end, brought to its end. It had fulfilled its destiny, resolved itself. It took leave, the gesture of farewell, of the D-G-G motif. Consoled by the C-sharp was a leave-taking in this sense too, great as the whole piece itself, the farewell of the sonata form. So, again, with this closing, Beethoven is letting go not only of this theme, but of the piano sonata. I think it's especially poignant to examine this subject on this day, September 11th. Many of us remember the events of September 11th, 2001 clearly, the fear, the loss, and not only of thousands of lives and their roles in thousands of other lives, but of our sense of security as humans. I think that Beethoven and Kundera are reminding us that in order to remember, we must continue to move forward. In order to lose and love, and lose and love with grace and with life, we must continue to explore the world. Only there will we find them, those we've lost again. So, on that very happy note, I wish you all a beautiful day filled with exploration, and I hope you enjoy the Beethoven. you.